Hello, and welcome to Making Online Classes Interactive. This is a recorded session, so there are no live participants, but welcome to all of you virtual listeners out there. My name is Dave Morgan, and I'll be your instructor for the session. If you haven't already done so, please run the audio setup wizard to make sure your listening device is configured properly and you can hear the recording clearly. For this particular session, there will be no need to configure your microphone. If you would, also please take a minute to configure your environment in such a way that you can eliminate or at least minimize distraction. Hang a Do Not Disturb sign on your door. Turn off your phone or at least silence it. And try to manage pets, children, and any dinosaurs you might have around in such a way that they won't make a lot of noise and disturb you during the session. For a quick quality check, if you would, please raise your hand if you can see the words quality check at the top of the slide. Then provide a green check if you could actually hear the recording, and then type the word recording in the chat window in the bottom left to verify that the session is being recorded. Even though this is not an interactive session and only a recorded one, these are tools that we will be using in live classes in the future, so it's a good idea to go ahead and practice these now. Learning objectives for this session are that by the end of the session, participants should be able to describe in general terms the evolution of e-learning in the community of inquiry or COI paradigm. Participants should be able to demonstrate understanding through several reflection exercises and a brief summative assessment at the close of the session. Please have a pen and paper or word processor available and open so that you can answer prompts throughout the session. There are still a significant number of people out there, especially in academia, that believe that there's no substitute for traditional lecture-based or in-class instruction. Sometimes the expression old school is used as a metaphor for traditional methods, and in this case it's literally the issue, so I had to include a picture of an old school. I do say that in jest, but education is like all other professions and disciplines. There's always resistance to change. That's at least part of the reason for the disdain in e-learning. However, such disdain is not entirely without cause. Many online courses and degrees are not designed in such a way that they provide a quality learning experience. Thus, the goal for us is to explore how e-learning can actually overcome its reputation and provide us with a quality of education that matches this in-class paradigm that we're all used to. So as depicted in the mosaic, Plato is sitting outside with students or colleagues and engaged in some sort of discussion. Of course, you can't tell from this picture whether they're discussing philosophy or the weather, but for purposes of this class, we'll assume it's philosophy. If you really want to talk old school, this is one of the earliest examples of higher learning. Note that they're sitting together socially outside, drawing from each other and on multiple inputs and senses. Another stage in the evolution of teaching and learning was a ubiquitous lecture, and it's easy to understand how this became popular and still remains so to this day. There's, of course, a really smart person sharing what they know with the participants, and they just sit and take notes and absorb the information dutifully. This is an intuitive approach, and it's not necessarily a bad one, but note that it's almost entirely one-way communication, even though some lecturers allow some dialogue and most will at least take questions at the end. However, this is not proven empirically to create or sustain long-term understanding or meaning-making on its own, and thus even this traditional model may not be the most effective. Therefore, maybe this online e-learning thing might actually provide opportunities for interaction that cannot easily be found in the traditional lecture-based model, and actually returns us to leveraging each other and our senses as they might have done back in Plato's day. There are so many tools out there and so much information that it can indeed be overwhelming. However, if we can harness this power and use it to our advantage, we might be able to provide much richer, deeper experiences for long-term learning and critical thinking. This means going beyond online quizzes and discussion boards. This means really taking advantage of the tools that are available, such as web-based video conferencing, YouTube and other video services, web-based document sharing and collaboration tools, and many others. So I'd like to pause for a moment, if you would, for a brief reflection. So if you would take out your paper and pen or your tablet or computer and word processor and jot down some answers to the following questions. Have you had experience with e-learning? Has it been interactive? What was your worst e-learning experience and what was worst about it? Think of your favorite e-learning experience if you had one. What was it about it that made it great? Again, pause the recording, answer these questions, and then we can move on to the next. The community of inquiry has its underpinnings in the understanding of practical inquiry, an expression which was coined by John Dewey. This is the process of receiving inputs from our senses, then taking some sort of action, and then receiving feedback from that action and assimilating those results for learning and knowledge. The main takeaway here is that this process of taking inputs from the environment and from others cannot and should not be separated from individual learning and meaning making. People have ideas which they get from their senses. Then they test those ideas, and then they get feedback from those tests. This is actually the basis of the scientific method that you may have learned about in high school science class. As such, a community of inquiry is a collection of individual learners and teachers interacting with each other and the environment for deeper understanding. The model of the COI consists of three basic elements: a social presence, a cognitive presence, and a teaching presence. The social presence is interacting and collaborating with others who have had varied experiences and perspectives. The cognitive presence is the practical inquiry process that each individual experiences and leads to their own individual learning. Finally, the teaching presence is the presence of leadership that plans and guides and facilitates learning. It's very important to note that this teaching presence is not implied to only be a teacher or an instructor. In this particular model, everyone, the students and the teacher, are both students and teachers. And this teaching presence may be, and actually should be, taken on by students and not just the teacher. For our next reflection, I'm going to play a short video using the web tour feature, and I want you to watch it, and then we will take a quick pause from the recording to write a few sentences to answer the question of whether or not this might be an example of a COI. So stand by while I set up the video. I will also be putting it in the text chat for easy retrieval.
No grades at stake, gentlemen. Just take a stroll. There it is.
Okay, and hopefully you were able to watch the video all right. If not, then feel free again to pause. Go to the link that I gave you from the chat box. Go ahead and watch it in an external browser, and then take a minute to answer the question of whether or not this scene provides an example of a community of inquiry. Next, as we move into the integration phase, we want to be able to apply e-learning and COI and put them together. So can you think of a current situation where you might be able to use e-learning and COI? So again, pause the class recording and think of some time in your life where you saw a community of inquiry at work. If you're unable to think of one from your own experience, think of an example from a book, a movie, a television program, or any other fictional scenario, preferably not Dead Poets Society, since I just handed you that one on a silver platter. In whatever case it is, whether it's from your life, an anecdotal experience, or from a fictional, how would you employ e-learning to create a community of inquiry? Finally, as we move into the resolution phase, a quick summary of the session as we tie this all together. There's still significant resistance to e-learning as inferior to in-class or traditional classes. E-learning actually represents a return to collaborative transactional experience, leading to more durable learning. And a framework for effectively administering an e-learning environment is the Community of Inquiry, or COI, which involves social, cognitive, and teaching presence as elements. Your last assessment that you will be recording and then sending to me, go ahead and pause, and very short answer prompts, only a couple of sentences to each of these. A situation that might arise that you tell a colleague at your work or your church or any other social environment that you're taking classes online, and they respond by saying that it's maybe not the same as traditional courses, and maybe they're even coming across a little negatively about it. Provide an intelligent but non-defensive response that includes e-learning concepts that you picked up from this session. And then for the second prompt, just again in one or two sentences, describe the concept of the COI and the ways in which e-learning might facilitate it. Finally, because this is not interactive and all you virtual listeners out there may have questions, please go ahead and take a minute to pause the recording again and jot down any questions you might have while they're still fresh in your mind. I want to be able to address those, so you can reach me via email or any of the other methods that I've provided you, and go ahead and ask those questions because there are no stupid questions. Thanks very much for joining me today. Please don't forget to send me your responses from the exercises as well as any questions you might have, and I'll look forward to our next session. Take care.